I first saw this on just talking with TD and Rob, and shout out to them. And when I saw this, I said, "Up here they go again. Here they, and we know who they is again." So this artist, who I'm only going to assume is a PC artist, drew up mock images of what the Rugrats would be like in this day and age as adults. As a kid who grew up in the 90s, I was a huge fan of the Rugrats from the time that show came on to the time it went off the air on Nickelodeon. It was one of the first cartoons that I really started to watch as a child. And, it really meshed well with me, especially because I fit in the age bracket of the kids that was illustrated on the show. Now, of course, we all know of all the characters: Tommy, Chucky, Phil, Lil, Angelica. They eventually brought Dylan when they released the first movie a couple years after the show had came out and had gained so much popularity. But there was also another character in the Rugrats that wasn't as big as the other characters because her character wasn't on every episode like the main characters that I just mentioned, and that was Susie Carmichael. And if in case y'all are unaware, also fun fact, Cree Summer, who plays Freddie on A Different World, voiced Susie Carmichael on Rugrats. Just in case y'all were unaware, that woman's voice acting resume is through the roof. But anyway, so Susie Carmichael was, on the show briefly, here and there. She was more like a recurring character. She wasn't a main character. But of course, she stood out because she was the only black character on the show. And she came from a successful family because I believe her mother was a doctor. So it's not like she was a bummy character. I wish they would have put her in more episodes, but it is what it is. But Susie Carmichael, she was almost there to be Angelica's rival in a way. Because, Angelica was the only female character in the show she was the oldest character. She was the oldest kid, but she was like the bully. But Susie Carmichael was always the one that kind of like protected the babies from Angelica and always put Angelica in her place, and Angelica just couldn't stand her. I wish they would have kept that kind of, going a little bit more, because that probably would have been funny to see. But, she was a popular character amongst everybody who watched the show, especially a lot of black kids, because although we did watch Rugrats, there was no black characters on the show until they introduced Susie into the show. And then it was like, wow, can we see more of her character? And, they started to put her in there a little bit more. But someone drew up this mock image of what they believe the characters would look like today if they had, they're grown and they're adults and had families. Now, every other character, and I'm going to swipe through briefly and then come back to this. I'm guessing this is supposed to be, is this supposed to be Tommy? I'm guessing this is supposed to be Tommy, or is it supposed to be Kimmy? Because I remember Kimmy was also a character that was introduced in the movie, The Rugrats Go to Paris, and I think she had purple hair, so this might be Kimmy, because she has purple hair too. Now, as you can see, she has a husband and a son. We have Angelica right here with her husband, and they have a daughter. And you also have Chucky right here, and he has a wife and 2 children. Now, I haven't seen, they didn't do one, I guess, for Tommy and Phil and Lil, and I think that's it. But I'm assuming it looks like a replica of the other 3 that I just showed you. Now you peep that they have full families, but when you get to the only black character that's on the show, she's a single mother of 2 children, a boy and a girl. And I believe that somebody was saying how they want the illustrator who made this said that they wanted this to be true to life. So basically what they're telling us, and this is actually a slap in the face to both black men and black women. It's a slap in the face to black women because it's this trope that is just nothing but a bunch of single baby mamas running around here with a bunch of kids. And for all we know, that these 2 kids could be fathered by 2 different men. It's a slap in the face to black men who are fathers, because it's basically saying that there's no full family unit there. It's just the mother raising the kids on her own, and either the father is a deadbeat or he's just dead altogether. And black people when they got a hold of this image right here, they went off about it. People will say, oh, it's just art. Why are you getting so upset? Why are you getting so upset? Okay, let's flip the script and let all the characters that was in here be, let Angelica be a single mother. Let Kimmy be a single mother. Let Chucky be a deadbeat dad or dead and have his wife raise 2 kids. Then what? I mean, they talking about some true to life. Let's not pretend that black people are the only ones that are single mothers or single parents or deadbeat dads. Let me be real honest with ourselves here. But we already knew what angle they were pushing when it goes to this. As a matter of fact, they actually did this in some kind of an ad through AMC, which is, the movie theater. And I actually had saw this on, I believe it was Instagram, where somebody I think it was Instagram. I forgot where it was, where they were showing an ad where they were talking about, people going to the movies. One part of the ad showed a couple, then it showed another couple. But then when it got to the black woman, she was by herself with 2 kids. See, that this is the imagery that they're pushing out to the media. And the scary part about this is even though this is just a mock image, let's hypothetically say that Nickelodeon said, you know what? We like these mock images that this person drew up. Let's do an idea or have an idea to turn this into a show, like a revamping of the Rugrats, but where they are now as adults with their families. And then they go with the idea of having Susie still be the single mother of 2 children. She doesn't have a full family. And have everyone else around her who are PC have whole families. Now, some people, believe it or not, actually saw nothing wrong with this, but there is something wrong with this. Because like I said, it plays on the stereotype that you have the black mother who was a single mother. She's the only black character in the show. And then all the other PC characters around her have families, like whole families. But there is a silver lining to all of this, because a black artist, a black illustrator got a hold of this and decided to tweak it a little bit. An artist by the name of Real_Tunes, and I'm assuming that this is maybe their Instagram page, they're a black illustrator. They decided to tweak it and said, you know what? We're going to give her a whole family. So here you have Susie right here with her husband. They're both doctors and their 2 children. Because looking at that other picture too, you didn't even know what kind of occupation Susie had. Like, what was she doing as a career? How was she supporting herself and her kids? But now you have an image that you can be thankful for and love. The wife, the husband, the mother, the father, and their 2 children, while they have flourishing careers, as you can tell. Now, this I can get with. I don't care how anyone else tries to frame it. It is what it is. Shout out to this Real_Tunes for fixing this image, because it's very easy to complain about something like that, of what I just talked about, but then there's another to actually do what needs to be done. Real_Tunes understood the assignment and executed it effectively. You know what this also reminds me of too? If y'all remember back in the day, like this is before I was even born, but about around when the Cosby Show first came out. Before the Cosby Show came out, there was a string of black shows, mainly sitcoms, even maybe some dramas, I'm not sure, but mainly sitcoms, where you had the black family, whether they were intact or not, were struggling. Because that's just the archetype of how the black family should have been, just struggling to get by. Hell, it was in the theme song, Good Times. As much as we love that show, it was another stereotypical show that they had on the air. But then when the Cosby Show came out in the early 80s, that literally flipped the black stereotype on its head and introduced a successful, intact black family. You had a black father who was married, had a wife, children, and he was a doctor. You had the black wife who was a mother, intact family with her husband, raising their children, and she was a lawyer / professor. And I remember reading some articles or just hearing things from different people that they said they didn't like the Cosby Show because that wasn't the typical black family. And that was some stuff coming from other black people saying that, because you had a lot of black people that could not identify with that because they grew up much like how the Evans were on Good Times or in Sanford and Son or movies like Claudine. So that was their imagery. But then when this came out, it put you in the notion of, well, you know what? Maybe I can make it. The Cosby Show was in a way ahead of its time and a threat to the masses, because it showed black people and black families in a different way that was never really depicted that way on screen. And also, too, they didn't live in the ghetto. They didn't live in the projects. They lived in a very nice brownstone in New York. They never really struggled at all. If any, I don't think they struggled at all. And they could not bear to see the side of that. And the fact that a show like that lasted as long as it did. We're talking about a show that lasted from the early 80s to the early 90s and sprung 2 spinoffs. Because if you remember, of course, A Different World was a spinoff. But then they had another show called Cosby. I think it was called Cosby, that came out in the mid 90s. And I remember Journey Smollett was on that show. I think she came on in like the 2nd season. And it was just called Cosby. And in that show, he played a different character, but he was still married to Felicia Rashad. And they still kind of lived that same kind of life, but they kind of tweaked it a little bit and had different like new characters on there. And he had a different identity and stuff like that. But if y'all remember what I'm talking about, you know what I mean? But still, even in that show, they were still successful. They were not bummy. And even then, they still had a problem with it. But I don't think Cosby stayed on nearly as long. I don't think it was as successful compared to the original Cosby Show. But it is what it is. And that's all he wanted to do, was just show black people in a more positive light. So when I see this reminds me of a Cosby moment, like a Cosby Show moment. Taking what would be seen as a negative and turning it into a positive.